So here's the agenda for today's meeting, but before we move on to introductions, I will ask Jenna Norris to briefly review the webinar logistics. Unfortunately, we could not make this an in-person meeting as we had hoped when we had the last council meeting. So Jenna, go ahead and go through the logistics, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. To start, please be sure to mute yourself when you are not speaking. And if you are not a member of the council, we ask that you keep your video turned off. If members of the council would like to speak, please type your name in the chat box, and I will call on you in the order that your name appears and ask you to unmute and speak. You can also type any questions or comments in the chat if you prefer. Please send your messages to everyone in the chat so that they do not get overlooked. Members of the public can submit questions or comments at the end of the agenda as time allows. We ask that you do please hold questions and comments until invited, and type questions and comments in the chat or indicate that you wish to speak. As the chair stated, this meeting and conversations in the chat are being recorded. The recording will be posted to the council website within 1 to 2 business days. If you do experience any technical difficulties, you can direct message me in the chat at ADWR host or call the help desk. The number is on the screen right now, or email tickets@azwater.gov. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Jenna. Again, welcome to this meeting of the council. I'm Tom Brzozowski, the council chair. DWR staff here with me today in our conference room are Carol Ward, Deputy Assistant Director, John Riggins, Statewide Planning Manager, Jenna Norris, Governor's Water Council Coordinator, and Catherine Rydell, Community Water Systems Coordinator. Also, Ben Alternator, our Legislative Liaison. I will now ask Jenna to call the roll for the council alphabetically. Please be prepared to unmute yourself and acknowledge that you are present. So Jenna, go ahead, please.
Okay, I will be calling council members by order of last name. Bass Aha. Director Lisa Atkins. Representative Reginald Boulding.
Present.
House Speaker Rusty Bowers. David Brown.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Misael Cabrera.
Just keep going.
Chris Camacho. Ted Cook.
Good morning. This is Laura Grignano, CAP, sitting in for General Manager Cook this morning.
Thank you, Laura. Maria Dadgar.
Good morning. Present.
Good morning. Henry Day.
Present.
Hi, Henry. Buchanan Davis.
I am present. Thank you.
Director Brzozowski, this is Misael Cabrera. I couldn't figure out how to unmute myself, but I'm present.
Thank you. Scott Deeney. Ron Doba.
Morning, Ron Doba is present.
Good morning. Doug Dunham.
Here for Epcot Water.
Excellent. Sandy Favorites. Kathleen Ferris. Chairwoman Amelia Flores.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Grady Gamage. Bill Garfield. Representative Gail Griffin.
Present.
Thank you. Spencer Camps. Jamie Kelly.
Present.
Senator Sine Kerr.
Present.
Good morning. John Kamik.
Present.
Cheryl Lombard.
Present.
Good morning. Edward Maxwell.
I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Stephen Miller. Wade Noble.
Present.
Good morning, Wade. Virginia O'Connell.
Present.
Thank you. Senator Lisa Otondo.
Present.
Sarah Porter.
This is Catherine Sorensen for Sarah Porter.
Thank you, Catherine. Dave Roberts.
I am here, thank you.
Governor Stephen Rowe Lewis. Kevin Rogers. Appointee Danny Seiden. Stephanie Smallhouse.
I'm present.
Good morning. Mark Smith.
This is Wade for Mark. Mark is trying to get on. We may note for the record that he doesn't seem to be getting the notices of the meeting. I tried to forward him the link. He's having difficulty getting it forward from me, but he's trying to call in right now.
Okay, I'll look into that. Thank you, Wade.
Wade, this is Tom. Can you make sure by sending us Mark's latest email, maybe we have their own email?
Yes.
Thank you.
Terry, I see your message in the chat that you are here. Terry Sue Rassi is here on behalf of Bill Garfield. Thank you. Okay, continuing on. Craig Sullivan. Warren Tenney.
Good morning, present.
Good morning. Tim Tremure.
Good morning, I'm here.
Thank you. Philip Townsend.
Present.
Chris Udall. And Jay Wetton. Okay, that concludes the roll.
Thank you, Jenna. At this time, I would like to recognize any other elected officials who we missed who are attending today. If there are other elected officials present who have not yet been recognized, I'll pause here to let you unmute yourself and let us know that you're with us.
Good morning. This is Jen Miles, Mayor of Kingman.
Good morning. Not hearing any others, we'll move on. I do want to welcome Buchanan Davis, and he did answer in the roll call. Welcome Buchanan to the council. Most of you probably know that Buchanan is now Governor Ducey's Natural Resources Policy Advisor, and has been added to the council in that role. So welcome Buchanan. We'll move on to the next agenda item then, and that is an update on Colorado River shortages. So there has been an avalanche of media attention to the issues swirling around Lake Powell, Lake Mead, and the hydrology of the Colorado River. While we're not asking the council for any action regarding those issues, I do think it would be prudent to give the council an update, and so we will go through that update right now. And if we can go to the first slide. So we've got a couple of graphics that are a little bit busy, but they're the best way to describe what's happening at Lake Powell and Lake Mead and the challenges facing us. So this is from the newly minted September Bureau of Reclamation 24-month study. It looks out 2 years. It was just published yesterday by the Bureau of Reclamation, and this is for Lake Powell. The yellow line on the left is the end of calendar year 2021, and the yellow line on the right is the end of calendar year 2022. You can see there are 3 lines, red, green, and blue dashed lines. The red line is the minimum probable projection, the green line the most probable, and the blue line the maximum probable, the maximum and minimum being 90th percentile for the max, 10th percentile for the minimum, and essentially the 50th for the green line, pointing out that there's still 10% of potential projections above the blue line, and unfortunately 10% or additional projections below the 10th percentile, the red line, that are not shown on this graphic. So at the end of calendar year 2021, where the green line crosses the yellow line, the green line, the most probable is what's used for decision making, will be in the mid-elevation balancing tier, and we'll expect a release of 7.48 million acre feet in 2022, in water year 2022, which starts September 1st of 2021 and goes through starts October 1 and goes through September 30th, the water year. What I really wanted to point out on this slide is looking past the December 2022 projection. We stay in the mid-elevation tier with the green line, but if you see the red line in the minimum trace, we fall below in several months in July of 2023. The elevation 3490, that horizontal dashed blue line next to the bottom of the graph. Below elevation 3490, hydropower cannot be produced at Glen Canyon Dam. That has repercussions for irrigation districts, directly has repercussions for irrigation districts in the state of Arizona, some other entities that get power from the Colorado Storage Project, and some tribes as well, but also potential trickle-down impacts on folks who have contracts with Western Area Power Authority, which is a bigger group within the state of Arizona. And also, the next line above that 3490 line, and it's hard to see, but elevation 3525, which the red line also goes below. Glen Canyon Dam is designed to be able to produce power below elevation 3525, but there's some uncertainty, according to the United States Bureau of Reclamation, about how the dam will actually operate at those low reservoir elevations. So we're closely watching both elevation 3525 and, of course, elevation 3490. So moving on to the next slide, Lake Mead. Again, similar format, obviously different elevations of importance at Lake Mead. So again, we all know the line in the middle, 1075, we're projected to be below 1075 the end of this year. That means we are having a Tier 1 shortage in calendar year 2022 in the lower basin. In Arizona, in combination with the Drought Contingency Plan contributions, will lose 512,000 acre feet of its Colorado River water supplies, about 18%. But for CAP feeling the brunt of that reduction, that's closer to 30% of their water supplies. Again, more importantly, looking out to the end of calendar year 2022, the green line against the formal decision-making line, is just slightly above the next trigger elevation of 1050, and where the green line crosses the right-hand yellow line. So that's a good news story, but certainly not a certain outcome, because 1050 then creates the next tier shortage trigger. But I also want to point out in the minimum red line trace that in July of 2023, the red line goes below elevation 1030. In the drought contingency plan, there was an adaptive management element to that plan in which if the 24-month study, looking out for any 2-year period, so it could be any monthly 24-month study, then when the minimum falls below elevation 1030, there's a requirement for Arizona, California, and Nevada to consult with the Department of Interior, and among those parties, to look at taking additional actions to protect Lake Mead from going below elevation 1020. We hit that trigger in the August 24-month study, and that is a very important trigger. And if we go to the next slide, I can share a little bit with you about that consultation. So again, it first arose in the August 16th publication of the August 24-month study. We knew there was a risk of that occurring. It probably occurred a little sooner than we thought, perhaps, in following along with the hydrology in Lake Mead and Powell elevations. Nevertheless, it did occur. So again, it creates this consultation requirement. We don't have a formal timetable, and the drought contingency plan didn't have a formal timetable. It also didn't have direction as to what the additional actions might be. It did not have direction as to what level of protection was appropriate for elevation 1020. For example, 100% protection, 90% protection, looking at probabilities. So the lower basin states have begun to meet. We have a series of meetings scheduled between now and December to look at taking additional actions, but there's really only two things you can do. You can have more quote-unquote mandatory reductions, or hopefully we can find partners who are willing to do conservation voluntarily to prop up the elevation of Lake Mead and to achieve the goal of further protecting elevation 1020. And of course, the drought contingency plan's goal was to reduce the probability of Lake Mead falling below elevation 1025 into single-digit probabilities, which the drought contingency plan, when they adopted it, did that. But we will find out later this month when Reclamation publishes the next visualization and projection, a table that looks at probabilities for 5 years looking forward, what the probabilities of going below 1025 are and perhaps other key elevations. So it really means that Lake Mead is continuing to go in a direction that is unhealthy in terms of the sustainability of the lake, sustainability of our water supplies, and the sustainability of the Colorado River system as a whole. And of course, Lake Powell and Lake Mead are conjunctively managed, so we need to make sure that Lake Powell also is propped up. And in that regard, under the Upper Basin Drought Contingency Plan, something called the Drought Operations Agreement, from July of this summer through December, 181,000 acre-feet of water is being moved from reservoirs above Lake Powell into Lake Powell to help prop up the elevation of that lake. And that purpose is primarily the power production issues at Lake Powell. So we'll continue to keep everyone informed about the discussions. The discussions are being, or the meetings are being attended by the Department of Water Resources and by the Central Arizona Project. So Ted Cook and myself leading the charge for Arizona, as we did in the drought contingency plan and as we are doing in the Arizona reconsultation process. So these are very serious challenges. We'll probably be reaching out to some of the water users around the state, tribal and non-tribal both, about any opportunities to do the voluntary conservation. Some of those discussions have perhaps already started, and we will move forward to try to take these additional measures and at least keep reasonable amounts of water flowing to the state of Arizona. So with that, I do want to stop and allow members of the council an opportunity to ask me questions or make comments. And I think you can just unmute yourself as you please. So I'm not hearing or seeing any comments. I will mention one last thing before we move on. Ted Cook and I have talked a little bit about an appropriate point in time in which we will hold some form of public briefing on the 1030 consultation process. That point in time will occur when it becomes more clear what actions we might be taking. We haven't really done enough at this point to have much more of a briefing than what we just shared with you. So that might be maybe in the end of October or early November timeframe, but that remains to be seen when the appropriate time for that public briefing will occur.
Tom,
Yes.
this is Maria Dadgar, Executive Director, Intertribal Council of Arizona.
Yes, Maria.
Hi, good morning. Just had a question. Thank you for that overview. You know, as many times as I see it, it's always something new that I realize and learn. And so I really appreciated your overview of the situation. But I wanted to comment, and you may be aware, and others may be aware, but the Bureau of Reclamation holds meetings, virtual meetings. They call them the Colorado River Basin Tribal Information Exchange meetings. And we're not ever really sure when the meeting is going to occur, but incidentally, one is taking place right now, 10 a.m. I think they're, you know, planned from Colorado, I'm not sure, but it ended up starting right at 10 a.m. Arizona time. And so most of our tribal leaders are probably there attending that meeting. And so I don't know if there's any way to coordinate perhaps with Pam Adams with BOR. I'm not sure who the point person, I don't know that Leslie Myers is in the planning of these meetings, but I know she participates. And so I don't know if there could be a coordination just to make sure that our meeting won't occur at the same time. And then as you're moving forward, ITCA always you know, welcomes the role to help get information out specifically to tribal communities and tribal leaders. They are a board of directors, and so I'm happy to coordinate with you as you're planning your meeting in, I think you said October or November. We have a number of meetings already on schedule, and so I'm sure the tribal leaders would want to be able to attend. So I'm happy to help coordinate with your team. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. I'll say a couple of things. So in regards to your request about coordinating, the state representatives have been having conversations, as you can imagine, with the Assistant Secretary of the Interior and the nominee for the Reclamation Commissioner. The next conversation, I will bring up the coordination issue that you brought up with me. I only became aware yesterday, I think it was, that through the upper Colorado region director that the meeting you are talking about was being scheduled. And I think it was too late in either case to change any of those meetings.
Sure.
Also, Maria, if the ITCA would like me or me and Ted to come and talk we're happy to do so. And I think you also know that a process that Leslie Myers here in the Phoenix area office is convening as well with tribal entities that Ted and I have offered to Leslie that we would come when you all want us there. We do not want to infringe upon the tribal U.S. relationship or get in the middle of any, consultation requirements connected to that relationship, but we're happy to come and keep you in the loop. And the basin states, Maria, are talking about how to engage more pointedly, I'll call it, with all of the tribes throughout the basin in this consultation process and in the Colorado issues that are going on. And we're relying obviously on conversations as well with the Department of Interior and Reclamation to help guide how that might occur.
Well, I appreciate that, and Leslie has shared that with us, and we do coordinate very closely with Leslie on several meetings, and so we have the Tribe Leaders Water Policy Council meetings, and you may have attended in the past, I can't recall, and now we've created the Colorado River Tribal Roundtable, and I think that would be a great opportunity for you and Ted to both join us, and so I'll follow up with your team, and we'll begin that process to have you join us.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'll just again repeat, we need all of the stakeholders and water users in the state to be part of the solutions. We need all of the states to be part of the solutions moving forward. We cannot do this individually in the state of Arizona. We cannot do that without all the states. And I don't want to leave out Mexico because we need them as well. The challenges are large enough that we need this collective action because no one water user, no one water user group, not tribal, not non-tribal, and no one state can take the burden of creating the solutions that will actually be meaningful. So as we talked about a couple of years ago in DCP, we need kind of all hands on deck, and we want to make sure we have that outcome as we move forward.
There is a comment in the chat from Misael. Misael, do you want to unmute yourself, or I'm happy to read your comment?
Yeah, Director Bushowski, I was just wondering whether or not there were any opportunities in the federal infrastructure bill to fund water augmentation.
So, Misael, there are multiple opportunities in that bill to do various things like desalination and increasing the use of recycled water, et cetera. Hopefully that bill will move forward soon. There's also, I believe, hopefully I have this number correct, $250 million expressly identified for drought issues in Colorado River Basin. That could be also used to help us deal with these issues through the Bureau of Reclamation. I think that's where that funding is slated to go. So there are lots of opportunities in the bill, and the DWR at least has talked with our delegation, our senators especially, about those needs and those requests. And some of those obviously got put into the bill at the ultimate end of the day, and Central Arizona Project was very forward-thinking in early on, even before the infrastructure bill was being openly talked about, pushing for the $250 million specific Reclamation Colorado River Fund, and they got lots of support from DWR and from all of the other 6 basin states in that regard. So thanks for that question and comment, Misael.
Thank you. Thank you. Good work. That's great news.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move on?
No other comments.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, item 3, committee updates. And the first committee we will hear from is the non-AMA Groundwater Committee, chaired by Representative Griffin and Jamie Kelly. And I'm not sure, Representative Griffin or Jamie, which one of you is going to speak or speak first, but we'll turn it over to you.
Jamie, you want to make a comment or do you want me to jump in?
Go ahead and jump in, Representative Griffin.
Okay, thank you. As you see, we haven't met recently. The session lasted 6 months, and I don't know, I haven't seen an interim period of slowdown yet. So we plan to meet for an agenda setting this month, I believe it is, and I think I've been spending a lot of time in the Wilcox area addressing issues over there and excited about some of the things that people are doing on their own over there. And I'm excited about seeing item number 4, best management practices. You know, I've mentioned that I think at every meeting, and perhaps at some time we need to go over what the legislature did this past year, this past session on funding water projects and different pots of money that will help the situation. So there were over $230 million that on numerous bills to look at water, maybe desal, maybe bringing in water from out of state, bringing it into the state, as well as $40 million for rural Arizona. Talking about grants and low interest rate loans, $250,000 for engineering studies and $1 million per project cap. But there are matching funds that would be available for projects more than $1 million. So a lot of things happening. And so our next report should include significant movement in what we are doing for the state of Arizona in water.
Thank you, Representative Griffin. Jamie, would you like to add anything?
I just encourage everybody to attend the next meeting. There's a lot to talk about in the non-AMA groundwater world. I hope to see everybody there.
All right, thank you. And as you can see on the slide, I think we've been working with both of you to try to find an appropriate meeting date somewhere around the mid-October timeframe, and we'll work with you both to nail that meeting date down.
Sounds good.
Any questions from the council members for the co-chairs? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next committee report. The Desalination Committee and the Chair, Henry Day, will give us that report. Take it away, Henry.
Thank you, Director Bushatsky, and good morning, everyone. The Desalination Committee is one of 2 committees that was carried forward from the prior Governor's Water Augmentation Council, replaced by the Governor's Water Augmentation and Innovation and Conservation Council in 2019. Today's presentation will recap the work of the committee, which appears to have come to a close, and to provide recommendations to the council. Before I summarize the work of the committee, we're often asked about ocean desalination. So I want to touch on why that was not a topic that the committee addressed. As the council is aware, opportunities are being explored for joint collaborative ocean desalination projects that would increase delivery or exchange of Colorado River water through the Binational Desalination Work Group established by Minute 323, extension of cooperative measures and adoption of a binational water scarcity contingency plan in the Colorado River Basin, the agreement between the United States and Mexico. Director Bushatsky co-chairs the Binational Work Group. Arizona, Central Arizona Project, Southern Nevada Water Authority, Salt River Project, California, and some of its water users are participating in this process. Next slide, please. The Desalination Committee has primarily focused its attention within Arizona on opportunities for reuse of brackish or poor quality groundwater supplies. The committee has explored the extent of brackish groundwater supplies potential locations for additional projects, technologies, and financing. ADWR staff, with the assistance of ADEQ staff, prepared a brief overview of permitting requirements for brine waste disposal for stakeholders. The committee discussed the Yuma desalting plant and the potential benefits to Central Arizona's Colorado River supply from operation of the plant. The council has been regularly updated on the committee's work. The committee meeting recordings, presentations, and materials are available on the council website. The committee has concluded that the most significant impediment to use of brackish groundwater is cost of treatment and brine disposal. As water supplies become more scarce and more expensive, and as technology continues to improve, providers will increasingly make use of those supplies. This is already occurring. It is helpful to today's discussion to touch on that. Next slide, please. With advances in reverse osmosis technology, construction of brackish desalination plants has surged in the United States over the last 25 years. Today, there are more than 300 inland brackish desalination plants providing water to U.S. municipalities, with 2/3 of those plants located in 3 states, Florida, California, and Texas. In contrast, there are only about 12 seawater desalination plants. On average, there are 50 to 75 significant desalination projects per year in the U.S., with an average capacity of 1 million gallons per day. The very first municipal desalination plant in the U.S. was here in Arizona, operated by the town of Buckeye from 1962 to 1988. As of 2010, Arizona had fewer than a dozen municipal desalination plants. The largest is operated by the city of Goodyear. The Bullard Water Campus Reverse Osmosis Plant treats 4.5 million gallons of water per day and generates 1 million gallons of brine waste. The city has made very substantial investment to treat the brackish groundwater supplies available to them and dispose of the waste, which continues to be a challenge. Agriculture in the Buckeye waterlogged area has long made use of brackish groundwater supplies because that is the nature of water available. Much of Arizona's groundwater is brackish, in fact. Given that a large part of the challenge is technology and cost, committee participants have suggested it may be helpful to have a forum within Arizona to connect providers with academic, industry, and financial leaders to periodically share and discuss technology and funding solutions, similar to forums in other states. Such a forum could be facilitated by industry and by universities, perhaps, and it appears that a conference may be an outcome of these discussions. Next slide, please. A subcommittee was formed to specifically identify and discuss regulatory and legal barriers to increase use of brackish groundwater. That subcommittee met and produced a summary of their findings and their discussion. The primary finding of the subcommittee is that there are no legal or regulatory constraints specific to the use of brackish or poor quality groundwater in Arizona law. Brackish or poor quality groundwater is simply groundwater and is subject to the legal and regulatory constraints of groundwater. This committee agreed and offered no recommendations for the council's consideration. This was summarized in the report to the council at the June 17, 2021 meeting. Council members indicated their desire for ADWR's attorneys to explore this topic further and provided additional detail. The council chair tasked ADWR staff to provide a thorough presentation to the Desalination Committee and charged the committee to make recommendation to the council recommending any changes necessary to policy to enable use of brackish groundwater supplies. Next slide, please. ADWR counsel Jennifer Hine provided a thorough review of brackish groundwater and Arizona law to the committee at the August 26th meeting, further supporting the conclusions drawn by the committee previously. Her high-level summary points were: 1, brackish groundwater is already accounted for as groundwater throughout the programs administered by ADWR. 2, considerations of proposals that would carve out brackish groundwater from certain regulations may have impacts to existing water users, some of whom may have relied upon the current framework. And 3, such proposals should also be considered in view of the primary objectives of the groundwater code, including the Assured Water Supply Program. There was no additional discussion and no dissenting opinions were expressed. MWA registered continued support that no changes be made to existing policy. Next slide, please. The committee participants identified no additional tasks to pursue and proposed to go on standby until additional work is needed. Committee participants would focus efforts on other committees as there's much overlap in membership. Next slide, please. In conclusion, the committee brings 2 recommendations to this council. 1, as there are no barriers specific to the use of brackish groundwater, the committee concludes no changes are necessary to the current regulatory framework to enable its use and recommends brackish groundwater continue to be regulated as it is, as groundwater. And 2, the committee recommends that unless the council identifies additional tasks to pursue, that the committee be put on standby until recalled for additional work. Director Bishotsky, these are the recommendations of the Desalination Committee.
Thank you, Henry. We'll pause and ask for council members to ask questions or to make comments.
Tom?
Yes.
Director Bishotsky, this is Warren Tenney. If I could just make a couple of comments.
Go ahead, Warren.
I just want to note that voice appreciation to Henry and the committee, as well as to the previous chairs of the Desalination Committee. They've done a lot of work. I think they have helped bring a lot more information forward to increase our overall understanding and about brackish water. I particularly appreciated the clarifying of the committee's focus on brackish and not on ocean desalination. I think it's important to continually remind not just the council, but everyone that Arizona is looking at and working on desalination through the efforts that you are leading on the Binational Desalination Committee. And just wanted to say that I am supportive of the 2 recommendations, and particularly like the idea if we could get a forum in the future that academia or industry could lead to help make sure there's a good exchange of information for those that are continuing to want to treat or look at ways that addressing the cost that's associated with brackish groundwater desalination. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren. Anyone else like to either comment, ask questions, or comment on the recommendations?
Director, this is Wade Noble.
Yes, Wade.
With the report on the legal status of brackish groundwater, it's obvious that we need to start taking an active look at the groundwater mound in the Yuma Mesa area.
So, Wade, in the context of analyzing the legal, policy, and technical issues related to the use of that mound, I assume is what you're asking for?
I'm saying that, yeah, we need to go forward and actively look at it, especially with the situation on the river. We need to look at the future development of that groundwater mound and recovery of it through desalination in order to supplement, augment the Colorado River as it continues to decline in supply.
And Wade, do you believe that the current desal committee is the appropriate place to look at that, or are you suggesting we have a breakout committee specific to just that issue?
You know, in my report, which happens next, I was going to mention at the tail end of it that we probably ought to develop a more or less statewide long-term water augmentation plan, which would include such things as desalination sites in the future and how they would be brought online into production, as well as the other opportunities we have for augmenting water supply. And perhaps that would be the best way to approach this, is not do it piecemeal or project by project, but start looking at it as we have, as Arizona has, as you well know, in the past, looked at things on a more comprehensive basis rather than just a single shot thing.
Thanks,
And
Wade. And does your long-term water augmentation committee, is that an appropriate place to start developing such a plan or having discussions about such a plan?
You bet. I think so. And by the way, it wasn't my bright idea. It came to us through the committee process. So
that's great. That's great to hear. Other folks want to weigh in on either Henry's report or Wade's suggestion?
There is a comment in the chat from Cheryl Lombard. Cheryl, do you want to unmute yourself?
Sure. This has been a really good, thoughtful discussion. And Wade, you and your committee, I think that's a great idea in terms of a statewide view, in terms of augmentation, and also my comments about how we can match it up with those federal dollar opportunities. So thank you.
Anyone else? So I guess using the power of the chair, I will ask Wade to start having those discussions in his long-term water augmentation committee. And of course, as we have done in the past, Wade, staff of DVR will be there to help facilitate and provide information and other things that you need to help move that discussion forward. And I guess it's the perfect segue into the next committee report, which is your report, Wade, on the long-term water augmentation committee activities.
And there is one comment that came in from Doug Dunham that I believe relates to the previous topic. Doug, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. I just thought since we had Director from DEQ on, maybe we could link up a potential exploration of how DEQ's new injection well disposal opportunities, how their permitting process is moving along, and how that might assist with potential brine disposal with some of these projects.
So, Mr. Chair,
so I guess I'll ask, first, Mr. I'll ask Henry, was that part of the presentation by DEQ that you referred to earlier in the desal committee, or was that already done in that committee?
Director, that was already done in the committee. We had a summary that was jointly pursued by ADEQ and ADWR to look at the possibility of permitting of deep well injection wells for brine disposal. That is something that could be done in the future, but has not been completed.
So perhaps we can do a knowledge transfer from that presentation now to Wade's committee, after some period of review, so to speak, perhaps then, Misael, it might be valuable to have DEQ supplement or answer questions. I don't want your folks, Misael, to have to do the same work twice. Want to try to add value, and we know that your staff has got a lot to do. But I think maybe that works as a plan moving forward, I hope.
That sounds like a great idea, Director. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I'll make sure that the previous work is passed on forward to Wade.
Thanks, Henry. All right, back to you, Wade.
Okay. Just let me check here something. I need to. Oh, okay. Ready to go. Here we go. The Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee has met once since the last council meeting on August 3rd, 2021. At this meeting, the committee heard a presentation from ADWR Senior Research Hydrologist Keith Nelson. Carol Ward introduced the topic and gave a brief summary of past efforts to explore enhanced aquifer recharge, or what has been termed as macro rainwater harvesting. She recalled that at the last council meeting, Chair Director Tom Buchowski had noted a legislative committee was created in 2012 to introduce potential recharge of stormwater harvesting projects, but had never convened. Carol reiterated that the director's closing statement on the matter, in which he stated, "In light of the challenges we are facing, the persistent drought, and the funding opportunities now available, we are at a point when we should resurrect the discussion in a meaningful way." Keith covered the opportunity in certain areas of the state for enhancing the natural recharge process, with the goal of introducing additional water to the aquifer, which may otherwise be lost. He stated that the potential for enhanced recharge is dependent on the physical availability or feasibility of a particular area. Keith noted that Nogales, Arizona in the Santa Cruz AMA is an example of an area that benefits from periodic renewable flood recharge in conjunction with proactive water management. Keith explained that multiple interacting factors such as dynamic operations of well fields, as well as the excellent recharge efficiency of the area, has allowed the Santa Cruz sub-basin groundwater withdrawals to reach long-term dynamic equilibrium. Boy, that's a great sentence. Keith then presented on the potential for enhanced recharge in the Prescott AMA. He stated that there is a potential opportunity to reduce loss due to evaporation by directing runoff to locations where recharge is physically feasible. Keith shared some figures with potential pathways for conveying water from Lonesome Valley and Prescott AMA, an area with high evaporation and low recharge potential, to Granite Creek, which has high recharge potential. As a takeaway message, Keith emphasized that the dominant type of recharge in an area varies on regional scale and is dependent on the hydrology of an area. I'm sorry, that's the hydrogeology of an area. Therefore, potential feasibility of an enhanced recharge efforts also varies on a regional scale. To conclude the presentation, Keith reported that without enhanced and targeted recharge, most of the participation from large storm events in arid environments is lost to evapotranspiration, citing an estimated average of 95%. Following the presentation, two guiding questions, which Carol had first shared with the committee during her introduction, were again shared. The questions were: what needs to be better understood from a technical, regulatory, or legislative perspective in order to move forward with these discussions? And what hurdles will need to be overcome to make this a viable water augmentation solution? The committee engaged in discussion following the presentation with a great many questions, comments, and some concerns raised. The discussion was closed out by reiterating that it will take time to fully explore the topic, understand what additional information may be needed, and discuss issues, concerns, and possibilities. As the director said at the last council meeting, It will be critical to have a sound technical basis as to the viability of these projects and if there are potential impacts or not to those who hold surface water rights and to have a meaningful discussion. The next long-term water augmentation committee is not yet scheduled, but it is expected the committee will continue to explore the potential for additional stormwater harvesting and the varying scales at a future meeting. Moving on to the activities of the storage site subcommittee. The subcommittee was formed to assist ADWR in identifying criteria for selection of potential underground storage sites for the revision of the joint ADWR and State Land Department 2017 report, Potential Water Storage Sites on ASLD Trust Land. The revision of this report was required by Representative Gail Griffin's bill, HB 2249, which required a new report to be submitted by December 31 of 2021. Working with the subcommittee, Representative Griffin and the Storage Sites Committee, ADWR and State Land Department expanded the report to include 331 potential underground storage sites on state land. This report has been finalized and was submitted to the governor. The President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the members of the Senate Water and Agriculture Committee, and the members of the House of Representatives Natural Resources, Energy, and Water Committee on August 24, 2021. The report was also, or is also, published to the department's website and is linked on the slide, Potential Water Storage Sites on State Trust Land. As a result of the discussions with Representative Griffin, the subcommittee stakeholders and the State Land Department, and with their input and assistance, ADWR has also developed a guide to assist stakeholders at the local level in winnowing down potential sites to those that will suit their specific needs and capabilities. The sections of the guide step the user through the process of site selection, progressing from high-level checklist items to more in-depth items that may require a consultant as the project begins to solidify. The committee has provided comments on the draft guide to underground water storage site selection, and ADWR staff is now working on finalizing this document known as the draft guide to underground water storage site selection, and there is a link for that. That's where we are, and with what we have just discussed at the council level this morning, it looks like the Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee is going to get heavily involved in taking it from what's available to what the state can plan and actually accomplish in the future with regards to water augmentation. The need for water augmentation has never been more profound or obvious. We're going to have to really work on finding water sources if we want to continue to maintain the Arizona society as it now exists. That's my report.
Thanks, Wade. Questions from council members or comments for Wade?
Warren, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I appreciate the discussion and the idea about with Wade Wade's committee helping to take the lead on looking at long-term augmentation planning. And I guess one thing that kind of came to mind earlier on in the discussion was how looking at water reuse and recycled and more bluntly direct potable reuse is going to become more important to communities throughout Arizona, whether it be individually or possibly regional opportunities. And I would certainly hope that would be one of the things that could be looked at in the effort of looking at planning on augmentation. But it also just reminded me, and since the ADQ director is online, I just thought it's also really important that one of the first steps that we need to do is to make sure that the Arizona Administrative Code on purified water for potable use is updated and ready to go in case as people are looking more at the opportunity of full-scale projects that they could be implementing for direct potable reuse. So I just wanted to put a plug in for that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Warren, for that comment. As you well understand, and many others on this meeting understand, a 10-year plan for water augmentation for the state is going to be a daunting task. We are certainly grateful that in the past, those who have been participating on the long-term water augmentation committee have the expertise and the experience to look at a scope of and actually develop the parameters for such a plan.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
Bravo, Wade. As you know, many of the things you just covered are near and dear to my heart. Mountain front recharge areas are very important. I think we can accomplish a lot, and like you said, you know, we lose a lot of the rains to evaporation, and if we can put it into the ground, we're that far ahead. And so, excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. That was a good comment. I'm looking to see real quick, like if Jeff Gibbs is on our call today. Yes, he is. Jeff, you should raise your hand simply because the idea for a long-term water augmentation plan really did come from Jeff. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Just to mention, you know, I appreciate the idea of a 10-year plan for water augmentation. It seems though that we're really going to need water augmentation done in 10 years, not just the plan completed or the plan for what we can do in 10 years. But with the news we got earlier in the presentation, we really are going to need some more water inside that 10-year time frame.
Well, Jeff, it's really kind of exciting right now because I sense that in Arizona, we're ready to do what it takes, period. Whatever it takes, we're going to find the water.
I agree with that. I've been a bit concerned. We're a bit hamstrung by the binational work group, and we have to kind of follow that lead. And we do need to figure out what we as Arizona can do, either within that framework or in some other manner to address some of our water shortages, which are coming very quickly.
Right, thanks. Anything else from the members?
Chairman Brushatsky and Chair Noble, just wanted to tap back on potable reuse rules. ADEQ does have a project to begin researching and working on potable reuse rules. As everybody can imagine, it is a very large task simply because the number of emerging contaminants to be worried about in a potable reuse scenario is lengthy. However, our process will include help from experts and associations in researching and drafting those rules. I did want to mention, and this is probably the most important thing I'll say today, ADQ already allows in its rules potable reuse. But the way we've done that is allowed project proponents to bring us information and research on their project, and we can approve individual project. We initiated that as a stopgap measure because we knew that it will be a lengthy process to develop protective rules that all stakeholders can agree on. So while we're working on the longer projects, we do have rules in place that allow individual project proponents to come to us with their research ideas and designs and have those projects approved. So while we don't have the cookbook already designed for everybody to follow. We are open to innovative recipes that we can work through together with project proponents so that those projects need not be stopped or delayed.
Thanks, Misael. Any other?
No other comments in the chat.
All right, let's move on to the last report.
Director, just
Yes,
real
Wade.
quick, I can't close my report without expressing sincere appreciation to ADWR for all the assistance and support they give to the Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee, especially the chair who fumbles along and they kind of prop him up.
Well, I certainly would give you time to make that comment, Wade.
Okay.
And I do appreciate it, and many of the staff that support your committee are here with us, and I know they appreciate it as well, so thank you. So now we'll go to the post-2025 AMA committee update. Co-chair Cheryl Lombard and Warren Tenney. Not sure who wants to go first, but the floor is yours.
Thank you, Director. I'll start off going first. Also just want to real quickly echo Wade's comments. We certainly do appreciate all the support that comes from your team at ADWR to help us with the meetings that we've been doing and just the whole effort with the post-2025 AMAs committee. So next slide, please. So since our last meeting in June, the post-2025 AMAs committee has met 3 times, and we have started the process to generate ideas for solutions and strategies. We are initially focusing on developing solutions for 3 issues that have a common nexus across all the AMAs: groundwater in the Assured Water Supply Program, unreplenished groundwater withdrawals, and the hydrologic disconnect. As we previously discussed, we would like the solutions to address more than one of these topics. And while we recognize these issues are interconnected, Cheryl and I decided it would be easier and more productive to focus on one issue for each meeting. So with ADWR staff's help, ADWR put together a presentation to give additional information and data to provide more insight about the specific issue. This generated questions from the committee, and then the committee members suggested ideas for how the issue could be addressed. At last week's committee meeting, we had 3 presentations about the issue of hydrologic disconnect. Hydrologic disconnect is what occurs when storage of water and then the recovery of that water can occur anywhere in the AMA, even though it may be it may or may not be hydrologically connected, which raises concerns about the potential to create or worsen localized groundwater depletion. ADWR staff gave an overview about hydrologic disconnect and then presented data about annual storage and recovery and how it is involved with hydrologic disconnect. SRP staff presented their analysis about where municipal long-term storage credits have been stored and where it's projected that they could be recovered. And then CAWCD staff presented about their analysis of where CAGRD has replenished in relationship to where member lands and member service areas have pumped groundwater. Each presentation gave additional data and information about hydrologic disconnect that was much appreciated by the committee. We then had a positive discussion about committee members and ideas. We had a positive discussion with the committee and ideas were shared for how to address hydrologic disconnect. If anyone would like to see the data and information gathered for each of the committee meetings, you can find the presentations that were given on ADWR's website under the Governor's Water Council's page, and then look for the post-2025 AMAs committee. Plus, also you can find there the recording for each of those meetings. And so with that, let's go to the next slide and I'll turn it over to Cheryl.
Thank you, Warren. Yeah, we've had a busy summer, but we're culminating now with the true discussion. We've had great discussions over the summer, well-attended meetings. I think we have 60, 80 people even last week online. We have been keeping track of all the suggestions that have come across either at the meetings, emailed to Warren and myself, and we still welcome those suggestions. We're compiling them now. But now we're moving to the solutions phase. And as Warren mentioned, we are going to really try to focus on those that cross over to those three major areas that we've been discussing. And we will then we're going to have 2 meetings in October, and then November, and then December to really hone down on where there is consensus on specifically overlap issues, but just consensus on solutions that we can move forward that will come to this body in December for your approval. We have not forgotten about one of our other reports, the Prescott AMA exempt wells. We'll be doing a presentation about that on some solutions that work committee has come forward also in October. So with that, I welcome any questions.
Questions, comments for either Warren or Cheryl? None. Seeing none, then we'll move on to item 4, an overview of AMA agricultural best management practices. And Natalie Mast, our AMA Director for Management Plans, will give that, but first, a little introduction. Based on interest expressed by members of the council and committees, thought it would be helpful and useful to share information with the council on the agricultural BMP program that has recently been updated for the 5th Management Plan. The design of effective BMPs and an effective BMP regulatory program was the result of a robust stakeholder process and participation by the Agricultural Best Management Practices Committee, established by Governor Ducey and reinvigorated by a recent executive order by the governor. It resulted in consensus support from the agriculture community and DWR for the Ag BMP actions and for the Ag BMP regulatory program. We believe that outside the AMAs, the BMPs or other BMPs that might be tailored to the local conditions could have broad utility and further the efficiency at which agriculture operates even outside of the regulatory framework that exists within the active management areas. So with that, I'll turn it over to Natalie to give the presentation.
Thank you, Director. Make sure that you can hear me. All right. Thank you, Director, and thank you to the Council for having me here today. My name is Natalie Mast. I'm the Active Management Areas Director responsible for the management plans here at ADWR. I'm going to talk through some high-level information about the Agricultural Best Management Practices Program for the AMAs, how that program was developed for the 5th Management Plan, and I'll also provide some resources for folks who would like more detailed or specific information on those individual BMPs. Next slide. Thanks. Very generally, the Best Management Practices Program in the AMAs fits into the regulatory structure in the AMAs. So the Groundwater Management Act in 1980 set into place a tiered and additive regulatory structure. Many of you are very familiar with this, where there are minimal regulations outside the AMAs, there are limitations on irrigated acres and requirements for metering and reporting inside the irrigation non-expansion areas, and there are there is a higher level of regulation in the active management areas with assured water supply requirements, management plans and goals, conservation measures, and withdrawal fees. Next slide, thank you. So the management plans that I mentioned on that last slide are where the BMP program is housed. The management plans have a series of statutory provisions that lay out the framework for those plans, but what you see here on the screen is kind of the basic foundation of all of that. Each AMA gets a series of 5 management plans which contain mandatory conservation programs designed to reduce withdrawals of groundwater. So another way to look at this is that the conservation programs in the management plans are a tool to move each AMA toward its goal by reducing withdrawals of groundwater. Next slide. The Agricultural Best Management Practices Program is one of several conservation program options for agricultural users in the AMAs. It was established by a change to statute, which you can see a portion of on the screen. It is required to be included in the plans, but is structured as an alternative to the allotment style-based program. This program was first adopted in 2003 in a modification to the 3rd management plan. So that's the first time this program showed up in the management plans. Next slide, thank you. The basic structure of the program is that the farm operator agrees to implement a series of practices designed to increase efficiency instead of complying with a maximum annual water allotment. In addition, operators farming multiple grandfathered rights are often able to submit one combined annual report for those rights instead of individual reports for each right, which reduces complexity and regulatory burden for those operators. Next slide. The practices that the farm operator can choose from are structured into 4 categories. Each participant in the program must achieve a minimum number of points from each of these categories and a minimum number of total points in order to join this program. Next slide. So the 5th management plan development process, I'll detail in a little bit here. But the program that I just provided a quick overview of, which was established in 2003, had some small changes made to it for the 4th management plans, but it was largely in the same form as it was when it was first adopted in 2003. So as a part of the development process for the 5th management plans, all of the conservation programs in all sectors were analyzed and evaluated for where there might be additional opportunity to save water and ultimately move each AMA toward its management goal. So we worked through a lot of difficult conversations in the process of those analyses, and I'm happy to say that we plan to publish the initial drafts of those management plans early next year, adopt them by the end of next year, and that means that those conservation programs will become effective on January 1st, 2025. Next slide. For the Ag BMP program in particular, we had an extra forum for those difficult discussions. The Agricultural Water Conservation Best Management Practices Advisory Committee, or the Ag BMP Advisory Committee, was initially established by executive order for the 3rd management plans in 2002 and was continued last year under a new executive order from Governor Ducey. That committee was tasked with advising the director on the Ag BMP program for the 5th management plans and any subsequent plans. The committee held 7 meetings and ultimately proposed an updated BMP program, which includes 9 new BMPs and 12 updated BMPs, with increases to the minimum number of points that must be achieved in several categories. This work was recognized, not just in the agricultural community or in the context of those meetings. You can see on the slide here some excerpts from an article from the Arizona Republic recognizing the progress that these changes reflect. This is important to note in the context of the program for the 5 MPs. There is a very significant value in the type of communication and collaboration encouraged throughout this process and throughout the development of the 5th management plans. And by working together, it was possible to identify positive solutions to move this program forward. Ultimately, this BMP program and the BMPs included in this program are selected and designed for the specific purposes of a regulatory program. So while BMPs that might be designed or selected for other purposes might look different, the process, the technical input, and the general ideas behind the individual BMPs can all certainly hold relevance for other areas. On this slide, there are several links to items that I've referenced today, a full BMP list, information on the Ag BMP Advisory Committee, and draft regulatory language for the 5th management plans, including that updated list of BMPs. The slides from today will be posted on our website, so these links will be available there. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for your time and attention today, and I'd be glad to take any questions.
Questions from members of the council or comments for Natalie? All right, then, seeing none and hearing none, we'll move on. And we're down to the closing remarks. Again, during the last council meeting, the council members heard a summary from Representative Griffin on her 2018 legislation, SB 1512, to adopt 1 additional management period, and a summary from me on DWR's 2018 proposal to adopt 3 additional management periods. Following the presentations, I requested council members review and comment on either of the 2 or both proposals. Those proposals were posted to the council website, and we've not received any comments thus far. So certainly the department is still interested in potentially looking at additional management period or periods. And I think we've continued discussing this with Representative Griffin. And I guess unless Representative Griffin has any more to report, that's the status at this point in time. But we will continue through Ben to work with Representative Griffin and see where we can go on this issue potentially in the next legislative session. So again, I don't know, Representative Griffin or other members of the council like to comment on that issue, the issue of potentially additional management plans, management periods.
Director Bishotsky, this
Yes.
is Warren. I'd like to just throw a comment in there. I concur with your thoughts and those of others that it's important for the department to be able to continue to have management plans for the AMAs. And I think it would be, I don't know, I know it could be a challenge right now to become overly specific about what the plans actually would look like, but I think it would be very prudent at the least for the department to have the authority to make it clear that there will be new management periods. I think once it's figured out when is the best time for, say, a sixth management period to start, and then the subsequent periods would be, then we could start working on, okay, what modifications would we want, if any, in how what would be included in the different from the fifth management plan going forward. But so I guess I'm just trying to say, I think it is important that the department does move forward with gaining the authority for having additional management periods.
Thanks, Warren. Anyone else? Go to the next slide. So, again, the next meeting and the last meeting of this calendar year is slated for December 9th at 10 a.m. I'm not even going to try to predict whether it will be virtual, in-person, or hybrid. Continue to fail in that regard, be able to make that projection come true. But that is our meeting date. The council's meeting notifications, slide, agendas, meeting recordings, presentations, et cetera, are all posted on DVR's website. This slide shows the contact information for the key staff who support the council's efforts. And with that, I'm going to thank everyone again for attending today's meeting, for the thoughtful comments and discussion. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.